Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Dirks, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Making eCollections Work in Your Workflow, which is sponsored by Gobi Library Solutions from EBSCO. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you should be able to follow along with the presentation materials. Along the right-hand side, you'll see a Q&A panel and a chat panel. If you don't, you can click the buttons labeled Chat and Q&A in the upper right corner of the screen to activate the panels. Please use the Q&A panel to submit questions to our speakers. At the end of the presentation, they will take a few minutes to answer your questions, so please do send them in throughout. If you experience any technical issues, please use the chat panel to let me know, and I'll troubleshoot the issue with you privately. Today, we're using the hashtag ACRLChoiceWebinars during the event. So if you have another screen handy, shout out to us. We're at choice_reviews on Twitter. Also note that we are recording today's program, and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archived version. All right. So today, here to introduce our presenters is our moderator for the session, Jenny Hudson, who is the Senior Collection Development Manager, Western U.S. for Gobi Library Solutions. Jenny, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. As you heard, I'm calling from Portland, Oregon, and I am joined with two very wonderful librarians. They've agreed to share their experience with ebooks and eCollections with us today. And I'm going to go ahead and let both of them chime in so you can hear their voice and know which voice is with which name. And they're going to go ahead and give you their titles. So let's go ahead and start with you, Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne Ramirez, and I'm the Associate University Librarian for Scholarly Resources here at the University of California, Berkeley.
And hello, I'm Linda DiBiase. I'm the eBook and Collaborative Collections Strategy Librarian at the University of Washington in Seattle.
All right, thanks to you both. First, we wanted to start with our agenda. And today we are going to have each librarian go ahead and introduce themselves. We're starting with Joanne at the University of California, Berkeley, and she's going to talk a little bit about the library and the collection, and then Linda's going to follow up and do the same thing. Then we have 5 questions that we've asked each of the panelists to weigh in on and discuss about eCollections in their experience with them. At the end, we'll have a couple of key takeaways to offer, and then we're going to try to do 15 to 10 minutes of questions just to wrap it up and let everybody speak and have an open discussion. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, Joanne, you want to go ahead and talk about Berkeley?
Okay, I'll do my very best. So, Berkeley is a very large campus with an extensive decentralized library system. There's over 25 libraries. That includes a main library and several subject specialty libraries. We have over 325 employees, and we employ a large student base of over 600 students. We have approximately 95,000 active library users, and we get about 2.6 million visitors to our library website every year. Our collection has about 12 million items in the collection, and it's made up of a variety of materials, including media and film and video and maps. We also have approximately 1.2 million ebooks that usage exceeds 3.8 million a year. And then we have approximately 120,000 e-journals, and their usage exceeds 7.1 million article downloads annually. we have approximately 1,100 bibliographic and full-text databases. At Berkeley, we also have about 45 selectors covering a number of subject and regional areas, and we serve approximately a student body size of 42,000 FTE. This year marks our first year at the creation and development of a formal library assessment program, and we just hired an assessment program librarian. And to tell you a little bit about how we make decisions around collections, here at Berkeley, our collection decision matrix is made up of several subject councils, which includes the arts and humanities, social science, the sciences, and a more general council called the Collection Services Council. The primary collection development body is the Collection Development Leadership Group that makes the decisions around the budget and the allocations and our directions. It includes myself, the head of acquisitions, a collections analyst, and the 4 division heads that represent the arts and humanities, social sciences, engineering and physical sciences, and the biological and health sciences. And I hope that provides you a bit of information about Berkeley, so I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thanks, Joanne. The University of Washington is on 3 campuses, of which the Seattle campus is the main campus. We have about 57,000 students, of whom approximately 3/4 are undergraduates and a little more than 1/4 are graduate students. We have 16 libraries, and our staff is about 340 FTE with 100 FTE student assistants. Our collection development program is quite decentralized. There are over 60 subject librarians or selectors, and I'll use those terms interchangeably, who make the decisions on what actually ends up in our collection and the management of our collections. All of these librarians have dual responsibilities, often in a public services area, but it could be in a technical services area, special collections, etc. We have a large collection of over 9 million cataloged items. We've been heavily invested in e-content for some time, and like Berkeley, we have over 1.2 million e-books, which we acquire in a variety of ways. I'll talk about that more later. We've had a long-standing culture of assessment here at the university libraries, and try to integrate that into our collection development decision-making. For us, our major collection development consortial partner is the Orbis Cascade Alliance. I will sometimes refer to it as the Alliance later on. Orbis Cascade Alliance comprises 3 states, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and 39 libraries ranging from community colleges up through the ARL libraries. And it's a mix of public and private libraries, quite a diverse consortium. Again, I will say more about that in a little bit.
All right, thanks to you both. I'm going to go ahead and move to our first question. We're going to go ahead and ask each person we're going to go ahead and read each question and then ask you both to comment. So the first question we came up with was, why do you include eCollections in your library? Joanne, I think we're going to go ahead and start with you this time.
Okay, thank you. Berkeley has been purchasing e-content for some time, including some of the big journal packages, which we started through CDL over 15 years ago. Our strategic plan, which is new this year, one of the first sort of planks to that plan indicates that the Berkeley Library will strategically curate, collect, share, preserve, and digitize scholarly content and develop user-centered tools that connect people with resources at any time and from anywhere. So as you can logically conclude from that strategic plank that one of our biggest priorities is to provide access to content to serve our faculty and students' research and curriculum needs 24/7. We also are hopeful that in time that this digital content that we're acquiring, including open access materials, locally produced materials, licensed materials, will open up new opportunities for scholarship that the analog world is not able to provide. And as it was illustrated when I talked a little earlier about some of our usage figures for ebooks and e-journals, you can see there is an absolutely tremendous appetite for electronic content. In fact, one thing I'll just add that I found out just recently is and the appetite for streaming media is just overwhelming. We have a resource called Canopy, which I'm sure many institutions have, and I was just amazed at, we spend close to $19,000 quarterly on items that are triggered because there's such an appetite for streaming media. So just to sort of recap, we have invested in e-content, and it's not just ebooks, but we do purchase a lot of one-time primary source digital e-collections, streaming media, data, and journal content. And I can't see that investment's going to change. I'll turn it over to Linda to talk about the University of Washington.
Thanks, Joanne. Well, I could start out by saying what she said with respect to strategic plan and the benefits of e-content in general, but I'd like to say a few things specifically about eCollections as opposed to firm orders or other ebook acquisitions methods. And why do we include eCollections in our library? So the data we've gathered on the eCollections that we have purchased show an excellent return on investment. So we feel that the cost per use data compares very favorably with other forms of e-content that we're getting. E-collections also have a benefit, or can have the benefit of comprehensiveness. They're especially good when you do want comprehensive coverage of a discipline. Often publishers will make their content available in an e-collection, more of their content available in an e-collection than they would through DDA or even single title purchasing. And this gives an added benefit of predictability, knowing what content is part of the package. Plus, there's also the factor of budget predictability. You know at the outset how much you are going to spend for an e-collection, and that's not the case with DDA, for instance. Having one invoice helps make e-collections relatively simple to manage, though there are some caveats about simplicity, but we'll wait a little bit to get into those caveats.
All right, thank you. And that's going to lead us to our next question. And that's, how do eCollections fit within your overall collection strategy? And Joanne, we'll go ahead and go back to you.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. So as I'll just kind of support what I just said, but eCollections are a critical part of our acquisition strategy here at Berkeley. We predominantly, at this point in time, are making selection decisions through firm orders title by title. We are going to be moving towards bringing in eCollections through approval plans in the near future. We pick up package deals that are comprehensive, like Project Muse. We have a history of picking that up every year. And then we also have consortial package deals through CDL, such as Springer. We also collect very extensively in print here at Berkeley. I have to say one of the things that I found out when I came here, I was a little surprised by the extensiveness of the print, but print, because we have such a diversified collection from many areas of the world, there isn't really e-collection strategies or availability to purchase, so we do have a lot of print materials. I think one of the things that we're working through here in terms of meeting this collection strategy is the complex issues around the selection for e-collections. And we're having to make changes and set best practices around our workflows. So there's issues around licensing, access, how we provide access, the perpetual access that might come with an e-collection or not, demystifying the cost implications around the acquisition, storage, maintenance, and preservation of e-collections, making decisions around platform choice. Do we go with publisher or aggregator? And then, of course, it's not just sending orders to acquisitions. There's many different people across the library, the way Berkeley is organized, that have to be brought into this strategy, including technical services. Our cataloging is not a part of acquisitions, and some of our discovery tools are run through our IT groups. So, and then, of course, it gets even more complicated when we're dealing with our consortia CDL. Generally, our selectors evaluate which e-collections to acquire based on a content perspective that is very equivalent to the same policies and guidelines and criteria that apply to our print or analog resources. We first and foremost look to make sure that what we're acquiring supports the curriculum and research needs at the university. We also look to make sure that what we're acquiring complement or add depth or breadth to our existing collections that we have supported in the past, and that are in line with our collection development statements. Also, we look to make sure that what we purchase is of a certain quality, such as peer-reviewed or from a reputable producer. Also, one of the other new initiatives this year is we have a campus-wide initiative that's looking at textbook affordability and accessibility, and therefore making more use of our licensed e-collection content goes a lot further on this campus, and trying to integrate that into our online reserves and make faculty aware of it is also a priority, and our collection strategy helps support that. I will turn it over to Linda.
Thanks. So at the UW, we try to buy the format that will best meet our users' needs, and we will acquire both print and electronic for certain titles, so that practice is becoming more limited as budgets get tighter. We acquire ebooks in a variety of ways. We do some local e-collection purchases, but we also have an undergraduate e-preferred approval plan. Of course, we buy ebooks through firm orders. We have a DDA with JSTOR, and we run some evidence-based programs. A considerable component of our ebook collection is acquired or accessed through our Orbis Cascade Consortium. Over 200,000 ebooks that we get. We have a ProQuest Academic Complete subscription. We have evidence-based programs with Wiley and Taylor and Francis for the consortium, and we also have purchased the Oxford collection and University of California Press, you'll be glad to know, Joanne, through the Orbis Cascade Alliance. And locally, we have, among our e-collections, Project Muse is the one that comes to mind right now, because I just told Gobi to go ahead and renew it for the coming year.
Thank you, Linda. All right. Now we get to the really fun part. What are the pain points? What are the pain points you find in acquiring these e-collections? So I think, Linda, we're going to go ahead and let you keep on talking.
Okay. Well, right now we are in a flat budget environment. Actually, we are, because of not as adequate as we need inflation funding, our monograph budget is particularly stretched. And in this kind of environment, it's difficult to find money to purchase new eCollections. This is even more challenging for us at the UW given our decentralized funding model. I mentioned that we have over 60 selectors, and each of them has a their own budget that they manage. We do have some overarching budgets for our approval plan, for instance, and our interdisciplinary eCollections. But if we wanted to purchase, for example, a new interdisciplinary eCollection, it's not really sustainable to go hat in hand to a bunch of selectors and ask for contributions to fund that purchase. And so what we often do, we're fortunate to have some endowment money for one-time purchases. And so what we have done at times is to do what we call a pilot and to fund a new eCollection initially with endowment money. And then if our usage data supports it, when it comes time to do the next fiscal year allocation of our state materials budget, then we take money off the top before it's allocated to the various subject funds. We'll take money off the top to finance that eCollection and build in funding for succeeding years. That's what we do, for instance, with Project Muse. Another pain point for us has to do with cataloging records. For instance, some eCollection providers don't yet provide OCLC numbers in their records. And of course, manual cataloging is really not a sustainable option for large eCollections. We prefer to use the OCLC knowledge base, but we have had and continue to have problems with this where the knowledge base records don't always align exactly with the titles that the publisher says is in the eCollection. I guess that's enough pain from my side. So,
Andy, you want to talk about the pain on your end?
Well, I have to say, I want to say ditto to everything Linda said. Here at Berkeley, this year, we are having a collections budget reduction, which is pretty significant, but it's not because we're not able to keep up with the cost of materials. It's actually a campus-wide initiative because there's a structural deficit at the campus budget level. But even so, we're kind of struggling with that. We're focusing most of our cancellations on databases and serials and trying our very best to preserve all of our monographic funding. So aside from that, I would say that's a big pain point. But aside from that, I think it's the typical things around licensing, depending upon the resource type. Some of the things that we kind of wrestle with is issues around whether it could be included in online reserves, course pack or learning management systems, classroom use, ADA accessibility requirements, and fair use provisions, all the typical stuff. We want to try to make the most of the eCollections that we purchase, so we're trying to make sure that these are all allowable. We also sometimes wrestle over perpetual access terms. Often agreements will say you have it, but it's the practicality of, okay, if you have it, but it's not in portico locks or clocks, then exactly what's going to happen if something were to happen? How would we be able to deal with that? We also wrestle over making decisions at the point of purchase on the access options. Do we automatically go for a certain number of simultaneous users based on the size of our campus, or do we go for the more cheaper option around single and try to upgrade later, which can be also a pain in terms of our workflows. There's many different models around bringing in eCollections, and we wrestle with them. And sometimes it's all dependent upon the content itself, but do we outright purchase it, like in Project Muse, or do we try out an evidence-based or demand-driven program? We also often have to wrestle over whether a consortial option is a better option for us, or do we want to go with an institutional purchase. And sometimes when you go for the consortial option, where with the California Digital Library, there's several different campuses, 10, and we all have different interests. So sometimes it's hard coming to agreement on what is the best content deal to arrive at. In Berkeley, we're so interdisciplinary, we usually want the whole package. The issue around timely metadata for cataloging is, I would just want to echo what Linda just said, their experience at University of Washington. It's the same here. And I would say one of the things that we find, because we often buy the big package, is determining what the overlap and coverage between what we've purchased from other places as well. So sometimes we don't know what we've purchased, and we agonize because we're facing this budget cut that we want to have very little duplication, and that's not always possible. So sometimes it's more of a conversation around what duplication are we willing to live with. Also, the incompleteness of content for some of the packages. Often we find that the most popular materials are withheld from the package deals, and those are the materials that often our faculty and students want. And sometimes there's content missing from certain items that would normally accompany an analog version, and trying to deal with that as well. And also, we're trying to get our materials as quickly as possible to our faculty and students, so the timeliness of an availability of an item, it comes out in print, and having to wait another 8 or 9 weeks or sometimes longer for the e-book is not acceptable, and we end up buying the print and not going for the e-book. I think that is a lot of pain points, and I'll end it there, and maybe that's one of the things we can discuss with the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I know the pain points, those are big topics. So we're going to move away from that a little bit, but I think pain points might come up with this conversation a little bit more too. And this is, how does e-collection acquisition work within your whole consortial collection policies? So I know you've both mentioned that you're part of this. Let's talk about that. And we're going to go ahead and, was that Joanne? Did you want to start with this one as well? You were mentioning CDL, so why don't you continue on that thought?
Okay. So our primary consortia that we work with here at Berkeley is the California Digital Library. So it's comprised of 10 different campuses, and CDL, for short, provides a number of services to all the campuses. So they handle collection resources as well as access, so they handle the licensing and manage a centralized ERMS for licensed resources. There's approximately, and I don't quote me on this, but I think there's, I'm new here, but I believe there's over 100 licenses worth over 25 to 35 million that they manage on behalf of all the schools. They also manage a mass digitization project through Google with all the schools. They manage a central knowledge-based SFX to turn on e-links. There's a central sort of a catalog resource called Melville, and they also handle a centralized resource sharing among the schools. They also assist with publishing, so they run the institutional repository called eScholarship for all campuses. And they have a preservation repository for merit for archiving and preserving digital content that's produced on the campuses. In addition to web archiving activities such as Cobweb, they also have a tool for all the campuses around data management. And in addition to all of this, They also, there's a shared cataloging program, so for the resources that they centrally license for us, the catalog records are distributed to us centrally, which is great. There's also a shared print program, shared storage. So CDL offers a lot of services to help support us. There at CDL, they have something called the Shared Content Leadership Group, which is comprised of some folks from CDL and all the AULs from the campus, and we help work through licensing issues, collection development issues, and things like that on a UC system-wide level. And also, there are groups called common knowledge groups across the systems. These are standing groups of experts or pioneers in areas of interest who identify issues, topics, subjects, and they work with the Shared Content Leadership Group, and they're comprised of selectors from all the different institutions. So some of the pros for working, and this isn't just CDL, this is my experience from several other institutions that I've worked at, so this isn't necessarily about CDL, but I would say one of the pros of working with a consortia, of course, is leveraging that group buying power, and that amount of money, we can have this opportunity to address big licensing issues such as open access, APCs, that a single institution by themselves would have a more difficult time trying to work with a publisher or a vendor. It also enables access to materials that some members in the group may not be able to afford, so it stretches our dollars a bit further. And it can offer opportunities to provide access for materials with fewer copies purchased individually at each of the institutions. And of course, we benefit greatly from the shared services such as the catalog records, licensing negotiation, and the acquisition streams and the management of our knowledge base. Some of the cons to working with consortia, and I think this is true of any consortia, is trying to integrate those purchases with our local systems so that our selectors don't unintentionally duplicate things that are purchased at the consortial level. And sometimes the needs of the bigger group doesn't always meet our institutional needs, and so we often wrestle with whether this is an opportunity that we want to participate at that level or we want to do something different at our institutional level. An example around this here at Berkeley is there's a DDA program with JSTOR that they're doing across all the schools. And it doesn't really work well for Berkeley because we're interested in a lot of the JSTOR material, and this is a 2-year project. So it was one of the things that I confronted when I first started here, and we are participating with that consortial DDA program, but we're kind of ignoring it. It's just going to be duplication of the content that we're going to continue to buy from JSTOR because just stopping all of our purchasing and waiting to see what's triggered isn't really meeting our collection needs here. So as I pointed out earlier, sometimes the reconciliations about what we bought in these package deals and making sure those knowledge bases and our discovery layers have all that information so that we are pushing this out to our students and faculty is somewhat difficult. And depending upon the situation, we often are wrestling with this particular issue. And of course, we might have different platform preferences here on this campus than the system as a whole. And sometimes, you know, that one-size-fits-all doesn't really work for us. And we often think very hard about whether the big deal at the consortium level is the deal that we need to meet our needs here on this campus. And of course, it's about, you know, you keep renewing these big deals and it becomes an issue around our budgets. And we're always in conflict with trying to buy the materials that we think we need and the increasing prices that we're being charged to keep those going year after year. And with that, I'll turn that over to Linda.
Thanks. Well, I mentioned earlier that we get a large number of our ebooks through a shared ebook program with the Orbis Cascade Alliance. And this is something that personally I've had a lot to do with over the years in helping to craft that program. And I think it's one of the ways that the Alliance can perhaps lead the way and point for a way that a diverse group of libraries can cooperate to provide shared electronic content. So the Orbis Cascade program is an all-in program. And by that, what I mean is that it's not up to individual members to decide whether to opt in or opt out of our shared ebook program. That's a different than our how we acquire databases, for instance, which is opt-in, opt-out. But it's an all-in program, and we share an ex libris platform, and as a consequence, the records for all of our shared ebooks are managed centrally in ALMA's network zone. As I noted previously, the Alliance is an extremely diverse group. Community colleges all the way up to ARL libraries, and that does make it a challenge to select content that will be attractive to all the members. As a consequence, we recognize that not every component of the shared ebook program will be equally valuable to every member, but the goal is to have an overall program that provides value to every member library and is financed in an equitable way. How decisions are made as to what comprises this program. There is an ebook working group who works with an Alliance staff member to develop, manage, and assess the program. Currently, the program operates with a $1 million budget. It's actually had that budget now for a couple of years. And the member libraries pay into that budget using a formula that involves their FTE, their materials budget, and the recorded use of the shared ebooks the previous fiscal year. I could say something about how decisions are made for instance, the two evidence-based programs that the Alliance shares with Wiley and Taylor and Francis. I'll just say very quickly that again, the decision for that rests with the ebook working group using data of usage, but it's not only decided in terms of which titles have been used the most are the ones that end up being perpetually purchased. The University of Washington comprises half of the FTE for the whole Orbis Cascade Alliance, and so if we just looked at use, it would be all the books that the University of Washington users used, which would be fine for us at the UW, but not really equitable for the rest of the membership. So again, there's kind of a combination of factors that are considered in deciding which books to acquire. And so every member, for instance, with the Wiley package, every member gets to have a say, as it were, in what is owned perpetually, because each member library's top used books are purchased as part of the evidence-based program, as well as the books that have seen the most use overall. It gets a little more complicated in that, but that's essentially how the Alliance is managing that kind of decision making.
All right, thank you. Thanks to you both. I think there will probably be some more questions in our question things, but I do want to make sure we have time for questions. So let's go on to the last of our conversation points. And this is, how do vendors help and simplify with this eCollection acquisition and management? So I will go ahead and say, how about, Joanne, did you want to start with this one?
Okay.
Good, okay.
So basically working with vendors or agents of eCollections, it is advantageous for an institution or consortia to work more closely with them for several reasons. So it can advantage an institution by way of integrating the things that we've purchased into the selection tools. So basically it kind of creates an inventory of what we bought and what's available to be purchased. So it facilitates the selection workflow so that there is no unintentional duplication. It's a platform that's neutral, so it's a great way to sort of collaborate and assess our purchasing history for collection development projects, not only internally to the institution, but often these platforms will allow you to see what other institutions, your peers, have acquired too. So if you wanted to do something more collaborative beyond your institution, it allows you to see that. It's not to say that consortia are not able to do this, but I will say that we get a lot more customized customer service and communication tailored to our particular needs. It's very institution specific, and everybody really likes that. The reporting capabilities from a lot of the systems on the platforms that I'm speaking to, but the reporting capabilities, the reporting functions help support our collection development and decision making, and it provides data around the history of what we've bought so that we understand our own purchasing patterns to sort of help with assessing what we need to buy and what our future should be in terms of what we should buy. And it helps sort of highlight what particular gaps might exist, and as well as the duplication. Also, we have found, since I've started here, we've been working with Gobi to kind of take a look at some of our purchases compared to the publisher output, because often one of the questions we ask ourselves is, how much of the publisher output are we buying? And there's no other way to do this than through a vendor system. And the issue around getting prompt, quick, easy to integrate bibliographic metadata for our resources is easily handled through a vendor system. It also consolidates ordering, claiming of outstanding items, and paying for our invoices in a consolidated way. So it offers, in my opinion, time-saving benefits and economies of scale that doing it all on our own doesn't present. So I just want to sort of conclude just to say that, as an example, not all of our purchases through CDL at the consortium level are handled through a vendor. So what we're trying to do is use Gobi to sort of upload some of our purchases over the past couple of years to create a more holistic selection tool. And hopefully we'll accomplish that this year. And maybe I'll be able to report back out on how that has affected and improved our workflows with selectors on making good decisions around what we need to buy. And with that, I'll turn it over to Linda.
Thanks. Well, whenever possible, we do purchase our eCollections through a vendor, and I'm referring to both locally for our local eCollections, but also consortially. In fact, I was involved in negotiating the current shared ebook program that we have at the Alliance, and being able to run these programs using a vendor was an important negotiating point. As Joanne mentioned, a vendor system can prevent unwanted duplication, either with the approval plan or with firm orders. Another important advantage is that through a vendor's collection development database, selectors can see in advance what is coming in E and make appropriate decisions about whether or not to acquire the print. And again, this is true whether we're talking about just within the University of Washington, or this works with the Alliance shared ebook programs, where our own selectors can see at the outset what is due to come on the Alliance shared plan. And since there's often a delay of 6 to 8 weeks before the actual catalog records make it into the discovery layer, that is an important time advantage. Although we haven't done it yet in our particular consortium, it is possible to opt, when you're working with a vendor, to opt consortially to own, for instance, a single print copy within the consortium, and then rely on shared electronic access to meet user needs across the whole group. Finally, I'd want to underscore what Joanne said about time and cost savings. Having to deal with only a single entity to acquire a lot of titles from a number of publishers, we find results in cost and time savings overall.
All right. Thanks to you both. I think we're going to wrap it up here so we have time for questions. I think we're right on time for that, so good job. When we were all discussing this and preparing this, we came up with a few key takeaways, and just what everybody wanted to have all the participants understand was that eCollections can have a very important role in your collection development strategy. They're easier than you think, and basically what everyone came up with was that you shouldn't be afraid to integrate eCollections into your library's resources. So with that, we are going to go to questions. And I think some people have been pulling some questions together, and I think, Mark, you have those. But I want you to feel free to ask anything of Joanne or Linda, or also of me. I work at Go Be Library Solutions, so if you have a particular vendor question and a voice you'd like to hear, feel free to throw that out there as well. So.
All right, great. Yeah, we've got a few questions in the hopper. This is Mark from ACRL and Choice. And we'll just take them, I think, in the order in which they came in. So the first one I think we have here is from Ruth. And it looks like Ruth has said, in the selection of eCollections, how intentional are you in providing textbooks, and or do you offer faculty sessions on selecting e-textbooks that your library has access to? And do either you, Joanne, or you, Linda, consider e-textbooks in the e-collections that you look at? Do you have sessions for faculty?
This is Joanne. I can speak from the Berkeley's perspective first. So, do we intentionally purchase textbooks? I would say we try to support that, especially if we get a request from a student or a faculty member, but I wouldn't say there's necessarily any intention to go through everything that's being taught to make sure that we have those things already in the library. We often rely heavily on those requests to come to selectors, and we do our best to act upon them and provide them if at all possible. In terms of providing faculty sessions, what we're doing this year, especially in terms of our affordability and accessibility initiative, we got some volunteers. So we have about 15 syllabuses from faculty who volunteered to participate, and we are trying to make sure that we have the materials in those syllabuses available online. So if we have already licensed it, we will make it available to them. So we're not necessarily asking them to figure this out. They're providing us with the information, and we're trying to figure out if we already licensed the information. If we have it in print in our collection, can we scan it? Is it fair use? And then there's been a few examples where we actually don't have the item in our collection, and we went ahead and purchased it for this particular pilot project. What this will mean in the future in terms of sustainability and how we'd be able to afford that is yet to be determined, but we're hoping that our campus might be able to help fund this initiative so that we can make the best use of the funds and not necessarily have the students have to pay for it all over again with a course pack. And I don't know if Linda has anything to add to what they do at Washington.
Yeah, a couple of things I can mention. We've been participating now for several years in an open educational resources initiative, and that actually involves more universities than just the University of Washington. But locally, last spring, we hosted a 3-part open textbook publishing workshop to which we invited faculty. So there were 3 sessions. The first session was on open textbook publishing, and which 2 UW authors who, with the support of our libraries, are exploring new open modes of textbook publishing. And so they talked about their experience. We had a lunch and conversations session, which was a facilitated conversation to explore how open textbooks and open educational resources can be used as tools toward equity in our classroom. And then the third session was writing a review for the Open Textbook Library, and that was a workshop for faculty who are interested in reviewing a textbook in the Open Textbook Library. And the libraries offers a $200 stipend to each faculty member for completing a review in that. One other point I'd like to make about the textbook issue is that sometimes we don't consider course-assigned readings as textbooks, but to our students, they're like textbooks. And this is one of those pain points that Joanne was referring to earlier, where publishers can keep out of their packages things that they think will be especially popular. And so we're working with the faculty on this matter too, just as simple as interfacing with faculty who may unthinkingly put a link to an ebook of ours in a course pack, and it turns out this is a single user ebook, and all of a sudden we're getting 100 turnaways as students try to access this. So it's a challenge.
That's very interesting. We've got plenty more questions, so we'll keep them moving. We've got one here, I believe, from Oi Ling, who asks, if you have an ebook approval plan, do you still keep the print approval plan? And how does that work at each of your institutions?
I think I want Jenny to answer that on behalf of the UW libraries. So we still have a print approval plan. Certainly our e-preferred plan for the Seattle campus is for the undergraduate level material. and then selectors can decide whether or not they want to get, in those cases, the print as well. There's again, Jenny, you can go into this. There's a waiting period of 8 weeks to see if the title will come out in E, and if it doesn't come out in E within that 8-week window, then it shifts over to print.
Yeah, and I'll say that's how yours works, but different libraries have different ways of approaching this. Some have secondary E-only approvals, so they allow for duplication. Some, if they have bought the print, have no interest in even seeing the E and have set it up so that we do a lot of dupe control that way. So it really varies library by library. And you're right, Linda, that's how yours works. So in the case of Washington, they prefer E, but if the E doesn't come out in that 8-week window, then we send them the print. And I don't know if, Joanne, you want to talk about sort of what you guys are doing right now versus what you hope to do a little bit.
Yeah, here at Berkeley, we don't really have our approval plan set up yet, so we're in the midst of setting up that profile. And in the conversations around the E-preferred, it's certainly more discipline-based. We do not want to duplicate. So in terms of the timing, the 8 weeks, is that tolerable or not? I would say the arts and humanities, and it sort of breaks down, department by department. Selectors make decisions on whether the faculty want ebooks as the first choice or they prefer to have print. But we are not trying to duplicate the formats. So like I said, I can report back in a year. We'll see how this all works out. Hopefully we'll have something to Jenny to help program sometime after Christmas. So.
Right, yeah, it would be interesting to know and to hear that report.
Follow up.
Yeah. We've got quite a few questions here still, which is great. We've got a question here from Lori, which goes, I'm curious to see what others do when perhaps you've removed a physical copy of a book and you buy an ebook version and then you lose access to that ebook. What do you do in that instance? Or are you looking at things that granularly?
This is Joanne. I can just say it's one of the things we fear, although I don't have a good example of where that's happened, so I don't have a practical workflow to respond to that. But we talk about it, like what if, and so it's on my to-do list to talk about, well, let's develop a scenario and what would we do if that was ever to present itself. So I don't have a practical example to sort of relay what we did to fix that. So maybe Linda's run into this before.
Not exactly. I think what we're wrestling with right now with these evidence-based programs that we have with the Alliance, there's not a guarantee that a given title is going to end up being perpetually owned by the Alliance. So what our selectors have to decide is, how core is this title to their program that they're supporting, for instance. And if it is core, they'll be more likely to acquire a print copy just in case. They will probably hold off on, at least we're advising that they hold off in purchasing an e-copy because right now there is access available electronically. But should at the end of the year, the decisions are made on the titles to be owned perpetually. Access will continue the next year if the Alliance continues that program. If it doesn't, well, even regardless of whether or not it does, institution-specific usage statistics are provided to all the Alliance members. And so we can see which titles have had the heavy use at the University of Washington. And if the title is access is going away, certainly we need to act to make sure we've providing that access to our users from then on.
This is Joanne. I have one more thing I can add to that, just as kind of an interesting tidbit, because I used to work at University of British Columbia. And I just wanted to mention University of Toronto runs on behalf of the Ontario Libraries, and I think it's 22 Scholars Portal. And so they actually load everything they purchase, including ebook packages, into this portal. So they have it. So that's never a concern for them. They bought it, they have it, and they'll never lose it. So, and it's also a trusted digital repository. So they have an interesting solution to that issue.
Yeah, that's very interesting. All right.
Could I just add one more thing really quickly?
Of course.
We have a policy at the University of Washington, which has been a long-standing policy, that for purposes of duplication control, we never consider subscriptions, packages of ebooks in the same way as we do ownership. So the fact that a title is available through Academic Complete, for instance, that's great, but if we encourage our selectors, again, if it's really a core title, don't count on it always being in Academic Complete, though ProQuest does its best. But go ahead and proactively purchase that title.
All right.
And I'll weigh in really quickly and say that's a question we get a lot as the vendor of ebooks. Do I own this stuff? And all the eCollections we sell, all the titles that are available, title by title, firm order, are all purchased and owned. So in theory, if the aggregator or publisher or platform was dissolved, there would be an electronic copy that you could then host in some other method. So it's not supposed to disappear at any point ever, but where we do see that, and I think Linda did mention this, was that with evidence-based or DDA, and these are things that we participate in, and so we do interact with that and have to help with some management of that as well. And that is definitely, if it's not actually been purchased by the library and they just have some sort of an access model, then it is not necessarily, there's no promise of availability at any point. So it's definitely something that one has to consider.
Definitely. All right. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time here. So I'll say thank you to Jenny and to you, Joanne, and Linda as well. And I'd like to say thanks to all of you out there for spending some time with us today. And before you sign off the webinar, I would encourage you to take a moment and fill out the survey that you should be able to see there in the chat box. Please let us know how we did. And I would just remind everybody that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from ACRL and Choice with a link to the recording. So thanks again to everyone for presenting and for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the session, and I hope you all have an excellent rest of your day. Bye-bye.